why are there so many Taiwanese crypto startups that are doing well? For like Web2 startups, it's really hard to make it if you're starting in Taiwan because it's, the domestic market is not massive. Crypto sort of flips that script. You're sort of international from day one, taking all these really smart, talented people and letting them access, a giant market that is sort of necessary to make a successful startup.
Taiwan has so much going for it and so much potential. And even the government in Taiwan is very Web3 forward. It really should have a bigger presence in Web3. Welcome to the IDK Show. The IDK Show is a podcast hosted by Bu Zhi DAO members. Bu Zhi DAO is a nonprofit, mission-driven DAO. Our mission is to bring together people who love Web3 and grow the Web3 ecosystem in Taiwan with the world. Today, we have such an honor to welcome Tom to the show. Tom is a partner at Dragonfly. From what I heard from the grapevine, you speak fluent Mandarin. Is that accurate?
It's true. So I studied Mandarin for 3 years in undergrad. I actually did my study abroad at Beida, and then I interned at a startup in Beijing for a little bit.
所以我们今天可以讲中文这个 podcast.
可以.
Amazing. What was your favorite food in Taiwan?
Probably 卤肉饭.
卤肉饭?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one.
Classic.
Are you excited coming back to Taiwan? How was your time in Taiwan? Kind of how did you get to Taiwan in the first place?
Everyone always asks me that because it's like, I don't know, not that many people do the Taiwan move and then move back. I went to school in the Bay and then working at Facebook, Instagram, 0x, just in the Bay, in SF for a long time, about 10 years. And during COVID, we shut down our SF office and everyone was working remotely. I wanted to move to Asia and be closer to some of our portfolio companies and other team members. And then it's really like between like Singapore, Taiwan, like Hong Kong, which I feel like are kind of like the business hubs of Asia. I think Taiwan just checks so many more boxes for me than like either of the other two. The gold card visa is like amazing in terms of accessibility. It's very easy to be able to actually live and work in Taiwan versus some of the other places. So moved there and was there for a year. And one thing that's interesting about Dragonfly, sort of one thing that people know us for, is we have this East-West focus. So we have about half the team in Asia, do a lot of investments in Asia, and then we have about half the team sort of in the States, and a little bit in Europe too. Like if you're in New York, you're staying up late to sort of get on calls with people in Asia. And in the context of Dragonfly, we ended up hiring some more partners in Asia. It made more sense to be back in the States, given that we have more coverage now in Asia. And so that was the main decision, but I still miss Taiwan. I think amazing country, amazing people, and
we're excited to welcome you back for Taipei Blockchain Week in December.
Yeah, I'm excited to come back.
And you mentioned a gold card too. Like for people who don't know, gold card is a resident visa that the government agency provides. It's really easy for anyone to apply. Bu Zhi DAO is actually working directly with the agency to help make sure the process is smooth for everyone. So if anyone wants to apply, feel free to reach out. We would love to help out to get more people to Taiwan to join us end of the year and just come to Taiwan in general.
If you want to work for a DAO or do Gitcoin grants and, live in Singapore or something like that, like it's not really feasible, right? Like they want real employment with like a real company. The Gold Card program is, sort of a way to get, really talented folks in the door who aren't doing conventional employment, but then give them a way to, start a company or start conventional employment in Taiwan if they want to do that, or do permanent residency. And it's like, I'm amazed more countries are not doing this because it seems like, everybody's vying for global talent right now. And you want to be as friendly towards talent as possible. I think the Gold Card program has been pretty remarkable in that way.
Taiwan has so much going for it and so much potential. It really should have a bigger presence in Web3 globally. And even the government in Taiwan is very Web3 forward, like open-minded. We're hoping this conference will really push that narrative, make Taiwan like most friendly, most accessible, easy place to live and work and do Web3 stuff, really build that community and industry there.
I think the Taiwan crypto scene like very much punches above its weight in terms of quality of projects for like the size of Taipei as a city and like the relative amount of capital in the space. And I was talking with someone about this, like why are there so many Taiwanese crypto startups that are doing well? For like Web2 startups, it's really hard to make it if you're starting in Taiwan because it's the domestic market is not massive. Not many companies are able to start in like a small domestic market and then branch out internationally immediately. Crypto sort of flips that script. You're sort of international from day one, right? You can build your protocol, build your project from Taiwan. And there's obviously a lot of amazing talent, taking all these really smart, talented people and letting them access, a giant market that is sort of necessary to make a successful startup. Maybe a bit like, Israel in that way, where it's sort of like, really tight, dense population of smart people, and now you sort of access the world from your doorstep. So I think it's pretty cool.
You studied computer science, you worked as a dev, and then you went to PM. and then eventually to VC. So that career path itself is very fascinating.
So I actually started getting into like Bitcoin, I guess specifically during my undergrad. It was like 2012. People in computer science were just into Bitcoin. I actually ended up mining Bitcoin in my dorm room with some friends of mine because we had free electricity and we found a way to get some cheap GPUs. And so we were doing that and it got very hot. We were like, working with like our shirts off and, because we didn't have any cooling, but the market kind of crashed and I needed to get a job and pay down some student debt and, do that whole thing. And so I left, IG at the end of 2016 and not with anything specific in mind. I was just, tired of doing the big tech thing and was looking for a new idea and something new to work on. And, sort of fell in love with like this DeFi vision before DeFi had a name. I ended up discovering 0x and really loved the team and the vision and, joined them and led product there for 2 years and sort of navigated the ins and outs of building in crypto, which is, very different than building in Web2.
In Web2, it's like you have to kind of talk to your users, do user research, which is really natural to do. You can do like run all this A/B testing, right? Like we did at Instagram. But in crypto, it's completely different. Like you can't really reach your users in an easy way. I guess Discord. But yeah, how is that mindset different when you transition from PM and Instagram to 0x?
I think you just kind of have to get creative. I think a lot of the same concepts still apply of, you want to build something people want and you want to look at the data and listen to your users. I think a lot of the 2017 ICOs, they had an idea and they raised money to build the idea and then they built it. And most of the time, like nobody wanted it. And then they just kind of kept shipping stuff that they thought was cool, but they weren't really sort of listening to the market. And I think that's why most of them failed. And at 0x, I remember like one of the first things I did like on day one is I showed up and I was like, okay, what's our dashboard? What are our metrics? Like, what are we tracking? How many users do we have? How many, market makers do we have? How many traders do we have? Where is the volume coming from? What are people trading? Like when we're shipping products, are they actually moving the metrics that we think they're going to move? And are we sort of measuring the impact that we're creating? But then also, I think on the user side, doing more user interviews. We would like use this data to find the top market makers. And then we go on Twitter and be like, hey, does anyone own these addresses? And then we get a lot of DMs. People will be like, yeah, I own this address. This is me. And obviously it worked at the time because there weren't that many people using DeFi. And so we would do that kind of stuff. Or we do like pop-up banners on the site saying like, hey, are you trading on 0x? Like we want to talk to you. And we do user interviews that way. So you sort of have to hack your way into a lot of the same principles.
Since it's like the Wild West, no one's kind of done this stuff before. It's like you have to kind of make it up as you go. How long were you at 0x and how did you transition to Dragonfly?
I was at 0x for 2 years. There's sort of this concept in Silicon Valley of like the 2-year itch. You start thinking about what's next and, do I want to start my own thing? Do I want to go somewhere new? And so I started to feel that a little bit. I was looking at some other, projects in DeFi. I was thinking about starting my own. I ended up getting connected to Dragonfly through some mutual friends and the whole Dragonfly sort of technical approach, investment philosophy, what they were looking to do, fund size. The East-West thing also really resonated with me, having been at 0x and seen how much of a big part of the story Asia is when it comes to DeFi was really up my alley. And so ended up joining and I've been here for 2.5 years now.
Another transition in your career where you went from dev to PM to now to investments. So yeah, I love this growth mindset you have throughout your career, throughout every project, Web2, Web3 that you've done. Just it's really cool. You jump in the deep end, you're like, all right, well, let's figure it out. What this role looks like, what I need to learn.
We don't want to get bored, That's the main driver.
Yeah. What are some of the PM or engineering skills that you brought with you that you thought was useful in the VC world?
Really basic stuff around diligence, right? Like, is this a technically sound, protocol? I think why people like working with Dragonfly is, we sort of speak their language. We've worked in the industry before. Working as a software engineer, but also working as a PM, you use a lot of data. You write a lot of SQL. And so as a VC, similarly, you look at a lot of data to inform your investment decisions, inform your view of the market. And so, having those sort of SQL skills and being a Dune wizard also is quite nice. So I think all those things kind of combined. I don't think they're essential to be a good VC by any means. Like a lot of the best crypto VCs are not particularly technical, but I think it definitely gives you, a leg up. Can
you elaborate a little bit on that? How their philosophies perhaps different and what's unique about it?
When we're diligencing projects and thinking about what we want to back, it sort of, again, goes back to this idea of thinking of things from first principles. And does this approach to building, protocol X or company Y make sense from a technical perspective? Is this a technically sound project or is this like technically bankrupt? During a bull market, you can kind of delude yourself into thinking like, oh, everything's going up. It doesn't really matter. But you sort of saw this right with like Terra, where it's like, I think a lot of people were saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like, this is not sustainable. And you look silly on the way up. But then obviously on the way down, it's important to have that kind of level of diligence when you're looking at things and test coverage, looking at code quality, All those kind of things I think add up to building a portfolio that you can be proud of and sort of stand behind. Backing the most technical founders is not, I think, the best investment strategy. There needs to be sort of a blend of both, but it's sort of a minimum satisfying thing you need to do to be able to get to an investment. So some stuff is evergreen, right? Just around, are these high integrity founders? Do they ship? Are they able to attract talent? Do we like this segment of the market? Things like that. But like in a bear market, you need to be able to survive to another bull market. And I think the question that we often look at is like, is this company going to be set up to survive the bear market to be able to get to a bull? Or is there just going to be sort of a lack of traction in the interim?
That's very insightful. What works? What's market proof? What's evergreen? You also mentioned like kind of you look at founders as a big signal as your portfolio. And you mentioned like you look for high integrity. How do you validate, someone's high integrity? I guess technical part can speak for itself based on their background, but are there any other kind of things things you want to elaborate on, like what you look for in a founder?
Certainly, if you're looking at integrity, there's, a lot of sort of small signals around it. Just like, why are they building what they're building? How are they approaching fundraising? How are they approaching building, a team? Are these people who are going to be sticking around and shipping for a long time? Or is this kind of more of a short-term, money grab kind of thing? Can I trust them to do the right thing? I think the biggest like indicators in my mind of successful founders are just people who are, aggressive and ship fast. I think a lot of founders are maybe too passive or, really kind of like perfectionist in how they approach whatever it is that they're building. And I think that the best founders are ones who are really aggressive about bringing on talent, bringing in users, using their investor network, keeping us informed of whatever it is that they're working on. So especially at the seed stage when the product is going to change, the market is going to change, but the team is sort of almost the thing that you're investing in.
I remember seeing one tweet from someone who said like they noticed from the portfolio, the ones who give them monthly updates on a regular basis, regardless of holidays, tend to be the ones that are performing better. That's like a strong signal, right? Like keeping your investors updated on your progress. What's the kind of the rationale behind that? Because sometimes the founder could be very heads down shipping, and they forget to keep people updated.
I think it comes down to like, do you hold yourself accountable? Are you getting up every day, benchmarking to where you said you were going to be, looking at your data and saying, hey, are we actually making progress or are we not? And if you're doing that, then, informing your investors is just sort of copy pasting, your own roadmap, your own data. And like, yeah, I mean, it's like if you're trying to, lose weight, I think I would, much rather bet on the person who weighs themselves every morning versus the person who doesn't. And, every 3 months they check in. It's like, it's just hard as a human to sort of, keep that feedback loop going. And it's, true when you're building a company too.
Oh, that's a great analogy. People would say like, oh, VCs will want you to hire fast, to grow really aggressively. And sometimes you can be at risk of growing too fast, scaling too fast. So how do you, as a founder, how do you balance that, growing, being aggressive, but also like kind of making sure the ship is like tight?
I'm very much against too much hiring in the early stages of the company. I think that's another sort of anti-pattern that I see some portfolio companies engage in, where they have the money, they feel like they should spend it. But, if you're pre-product market fit, the incremental headcount is not necessarily going to help you ship faster. And in fact, can actually slow you down because you have now this communication overhead. And pre-PMF, you really have to be very nimble and be able to shift your strategy if the market needs to do so. And so when it comes to shipping velocity and BD, some teams are just unbelievably good at BD. They're able to aggressively network, get connections, pitch, close, just do the whole thing. And some teams are just not, and they just sort of build the thing. And it's not relevant for every single team, but a big bifurcation in my mind of teams that can really nail that component of the business and teams that can't.
I'd love to jump to what we mentioned earlier a few times actually throughout the podcast on the philosophy of the East and the West.
It's a big part of our DNA. Again, we have an office in Singapore, a good chunk of our LP base in Asia, a good chunk of our portfolio base in Asia. I think if you are only investing in US and Europe, you're just missing a large part of that picture. I think the different regions are also good at different things. I think Asia CFI has been crushing US CFI for a very long time. Like pretty much everything Asia has been doing, the US will maybe be doing in like 2 or 3 years. The US is still very much ahead when it comes to new technical advancements, DeFi, new layer ones. But a lot of the adoption of those also comes from Asia. And so one thing we sort of clarify is like we're not like an index of that. We're not like 50% Asia, 50% the West. It's more, hey, we see everything. And we can sort of pick and choose, the best teams from every region to build the best portfolio that we want. It's often very synergistic to have that kind of approach.
Talking about how crypto is global by default, right? But still, there's still a very regional based kind of market share game that's going on. So how do you balance that, and what's the difference between Asia and US when you look at, do you like calibrate based on the region? Like, oh, in this region, we look at these signals more so than these signals, or do you use like a blanket approach, like, hey, we're just going to use the same principles?
There's definitely a cultural gap. I think especially in crypto, a lot of the pitches and teams that you see in Asia would feel maybe very like scammy or shilly if they were like a US team, but it's kind of the nature of the market, and that's like how you be successful, and that's what the market is receptive to. And so, I think if you come into that with the same mindset that you're investing into Western teams, you're probably gonna like pass on a lot of things that are going to be amazing investments. And obviously, a large part of our success too is just having so many boots on the ground and having so many people who worked at unicorns in Asia or did venture investments in Asia. We're sort of speaking from experience when we're doing diligence.
Throughout your investment time in Dragonfly, like what are some like big home runs we've seen in Asia and US?
When it comes to Asia, like I think we're investors in like 4 of the 5 Asia crypto unicorns. So Amber, Bybit, we did BitGet recently. Incredible companies that have come from basically nothing 3 years ago to being multi-billion-dollar companies now. We're in a lot of the OG DeFi stuff: DYDX, Compound, 1inch, Ribbon. And we led a lot of those rounds. And so, I think there's still like so much more to come in both regions in terms of what are the winners going to look like 2 or 3 years from now, and what sectors are going to be important 2 or 3 years from now. So we're still doing a lot of investments, and there's still a lot of amazing talent coming into the space, and super interesting companies being built. So we're excited to be here.
So what do you think is the winners going to look like in 2 to 3 years?
Good question. I don't know if I can leak that much alpha. I do think like hybridization of crypto companies, of taking traditional consumer or enterprise applications and weaving crypto into it in some way that makes it stronger. A lot of teams interpret this as, oh, I want to build like decentralized Twitter, or I want to build like decentralized Google Docs or something, which I think is the wrong approach. I think it's more interesting to think about, how can you take the Twitter or the Google Docs that everybody knows and loves, and somehow make it stronger and integrate it more deeply with crypto, and allow it to do something that you previously couldn't do. Like I did Internet Game recently as an investment, and in my mind that's a great example of, it's not just we're taking this MOBA and we're gonna like put the in-game items on a blockchain and their NFTs and like call it a day. It's this like big global tournament with this big pot of money that is just like not feasible to build in Web2. If you think about how do you accept payments from anyone around the world? How do you build this game that anyone around the world can play? With Web3, it's this amazing Web2 game that has this sort of moneyness and the interestingness of what makes crypto interesting in my mind. So those kinds of things I think are going to be increasing winners for like the next few years.
Like 1,000% agree with that. I was recently just kind of thinking through the same topic and writing about it. I think for crypto to make it, especially next cycle and long term, it has to be coming from existing behaviors, existing what people are familiar with. I like to term that the benign Trojan horse, where crypto's coming in as not as, oh, here's NFT, here are DAOs, and like bam, like instead of like the marketing term, it should be the infrastructure. You wouldn't say like, oh, Netflix is like video streaming built on Postgres. I kind of agree with you that this is the wrong approach. It should own NFTs without even knowing what NFTs are or knowing that they own NFTs. That's kind of a better approach to mass adoption, which is always like, in my opinion, like kind of the end game, right? To get more people onboarded, not just to get them onboarded, but for them to actually find value and find it useful and accessible.
Every cycle looks different, and like the meta within these sectors also just changes all the time. Like DeFi today looks very different than DeFi 2 years ago, or NFTs today look very different than NFTs a year ago. And so, as an investor, it kind of makes you stay on your toes, but also makes it very exciting to be able to keep trying to find the new winners of the next cycle.
Yeah, I'm also bullish on just things that are viable in itself without the Web3 part, and the Web3 part just kind of sprinkles on top and supercharges it, right? Instead of being like the marketing term. And I think one thing is also interesting is DAOs, right? DAOs is kind of a meta that's been around for a while. There's nonprofit DAOs, there's investment DAOs, there's cultural DAOs, and all trying to do really ambitious and cool things that wasn't possible before. A lot of people say like, oh, DAOs are kind of idealistic. I know Vitalik recently had a blog post. The best approach is kind of have like a Web 2.5 approach. Where do you see kind of DAOs going in the future?
I think for these on-chain protocols that need some sort of upgradability or governance, those DAOs will always be there. Maker would not be Maker without a DAO. More DeFi protocols will probably go the way of Maker when it comes to decentralizing more components of the protocol to make it more robust. Beyond that, I mean, I think the collector DAO stuff is still happening. I think a lot of them have to think about adding more value in some way. I was really excited about the Constitution DAO. Is using DAOs as like a group funding, like a global crowdfunding mechanism. If you think about like the 2017 ICO wave, permissionless global capital formation, and that had never really been done before. And I think obviously there were a lot of issues with the way ICOs were done, but like as a tool, that's incredibly powerful. And I think that sort of second wave of using DAOs as like another crowdfunding mechanism that's maybe more responsible than an ICO, that will come back in the future. I
know you're also part of PleasrDAO. To use the same question, why is PleasrDAO a DAO?
Part of it is obviously collecting NFTs as art versus real world assets as art. I think the larger aspiration is to eventually open this up and allow anybody to be a part of it. And that is also just like not really feasible if you are a single corporation or something in one locale. If you're a big fan of something that Pleasr is doing, and maybe in the future buy some Peeps tokens and have your voice be heard.
Like, what are some of the learnings you kind of seen? What part of the DAO part makes it supercharges it?
There's a lot of collector DAOs out there of we go buy this thing and sort of hope the number goes up. PleasrDAO is about getting these cultural artifacts, but also imbuing them with more value than they would have had before by helping to build a community or building applications around them. It goes above and beyond what a conventional collector DAO is trying to do.
So you guys are really Taiwan originated. I love that. I think most people don't know that story. I think you guys were like one of the earlier DAOs, one of the earliest, and certainly one that made the loudest noise in the space, largest impact.
And I was gonna say I'm talking to Bu Zhi DAO, so yeah, it's funny. PleasrDAO is also very obviously Taiwan originated DAO, so kind of coming full circle. I thought this would be like a Taiwan podcast, but really it's kind of everything. So yeah, it was great to chat. I mean, thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for the time. Can't wait to see you in Taiwan.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the IDK Show. If you want to learn more about Bu Zhi DAO, come to our website, buzhidao.tw. We're also hosting Taipei Blockchain Week at the end of the year in December. Come hang out with us. If you're not in Taiwan, this will be the perfect time to go back. And if you've never been to Taiwan, allow us to show you around our beautiful island.
All 100 of us. You've got friends here.
你知不知道？你在不在？
我不知道。